At some point in your life, you stopped wanting things. Not because you were sad, not because anything went wrong. You had everything you were supposed to have. Food in the fridge, a phone in your hand, somewhere warm to sleep. You had comfort, you had safety. And quietly, without noticing, you stopped. No ambition that felt urgent, no fight that felt worth having, no direction that felt like it mattered enough to move toward. Just days, one after another, full of nothing in particular. You probably told yourself it was a phase. The pivot. Enter the experiment. In 1968, an American scientist named John Calhoun watched the exact same thing happen to a colony of mice, except the mice never recovered. Calhoun wasn't just a scientist, he was obsessed, the way people are obsessed when a question won't leave them alone. His question was simple, brutally simple. What happens to a society when nothing is hard anymore? He had spent 2 decades chasing the answer. He had run the experiment 24 times before this one, in forests, in barns, in laboratory rooms. Each time he had seen the same pattern. Each time he had watched it end the same way. The 25th was meant to be the final answer, the clean one, the one nobody could argue with. Building the paradise, slow and deliberate. He built a world inside a federal research lab in Maryland, 9 feet square, apartments stacked along every wall, reached by mesh tunnels running floor to ceiling. He called them walk-up apartments. The temperature, perfect. The nesting material, soft. The cages, cleaned by hand, on schedule, without fail. The food hoppers never ran empty. The water bottles never ran dry. There were no predators, no diseases, no threats of any kind. He placed 8 mice inside, 4 males, 4 females, the healthiest specimens from the entire breeding colony of the National Institutes of Health. He shut the lid, and he waited. He called it Universe 25. By the time it was over, every single mouse inside was dead. Not one of them died from anything a vet could have diagnosed. And what killed them, what actually killed them, is the reason you felt something when I said you stopped wanting things. Because it might be happening to you, too. For the first 104 days, almost nothing happened. The mice explored. They learned geography. They worked out who slept where. Peaceful, orderly, exactly what a paradise is supposed to look like. Then the first litters were born, and the population began to double every 55 days. Twice as many mice as before, then twice again after that. By day 315, not even a year in, over 600 animals were living inside, climbing over each other on the ramps, sleeping in piles, jostling for space at the tops of the apartments. This is the exact moment everything began to fall apart. In a normal mouse colony, when the population outgrows the territory, the surplus leaves. They move on. They find new ground. That instinct is hardwired into the species. Inside Universe 25, there was no new ground. The young males, the ones who should have gone out and built something, had nowhere to go, no territory to claim, no fight to win. So they drifted. They formed listless pools in the center of the enclosure. Calhoun would stand above the pen for hours, watching them do absolutely nothing. They were healthy, well-fed, safe, and completely hollow. When one of them was attacked by another mouse, he didn't fight back. He just lay there, absorbed the damage, then stood up, walked a few feet, and lay down again, as if nothing in the world was worth defending. But not every male went quiet. A second group formed at exactly the same time, on the opposite end of the spectrum, frantic, erratic, moving faster than any other mouse in the enclosure. They forced themselves into nests that other males were actively defending. They skipped every courtship ritual. They refused to be deterred, not even by violence. 2 types of males, both are broken, both produced by the same paradise. One group checked out completely. The other couldn't stop, not because they were thriving, but because they had lost the ability to regulate themselves at all. Then Calhoun noticed something he hadn't predicted. He called it the behavioral sink. The food was equally available everywhere. Every hopper was full. But the mice stopped eating alone. They began crowding compulsively just around a few specific feeders, pushing, piling, waiting, while full hoppers on the other side of the enclosure sat completely untouched. The presence of other bodies had become so wired into their instincts that they couldn't function without the crowd, even when the crowd was destroying them. They needed the chaos because the chaos was the only thing that still felt like being alive. And then the mothers began to fail. The males who had claimed territory grew too exhausted to keep patrolling. They stopped protecting their families, so the mothers had to defend the nest alone while still nursing. They couldn't hold both. They turned on their own young, abandoned pups in scattered places. Some forgot which ones belonged to them. Others stopped recognizing their offspring entirely. And in the worst sections of Universe 25, mothers began eating their own. In some parts of Universe 25, fewer than 1 in 20 newborn mice survived to weaning. Calhoun wrote that by this point, the social fabric of the colony was effectively dead. The bodies were still alive. The structure that held them together as a species was not. The pups that survived grew up watching all of this, no model of what a functioning life looked like, raised by mothers who barely noticed whether they lived. When they grew up, they became something Calhoun had never seen in 24 previous experiments, something he couldn't explain with biology, with disease, with any external cause at all. He named them the beautiful ones. And they are the most disturbing thing in this entire story, not because of what they did, but because of what they stopped doing entirely. The beautiful ones never fought. They never tried to mate, never engaged in any social activity at all. They ate, they slept, and they groomed themselves obsessively until their fur was perfect. They were the best-looking mice in the entire colony, unmarked, unscratched, pristine, because they had never once risked anything for anything. They moved through the colony as if no other mouse existed in it, alive in body, absent in every way that mattered. On day 560, the population peaked at 2,200 mice. It would never go higher. The last successful conception inside Universe 25 happened on day 920. After that, no new mice were born, ever again. The beautiful ones kept grooming. The secluded females stayed in their high apartments. Violence carried on in pockets with no purpose left to it. And one by one, the mice died of old age with nothing coming up behind them. On May 23, 1973, the last mouse in Universe 25 died, 4 years and 10 months after Calhoun shut the lid. The false lesson: give them what they expect. When Calhoun's paper came out, the world ran with the obvious reading: comfort kills, abundance destroys. A life with no struggle is a life that eats itself from the inside. The image of the beautiful ones, perfect-looking and quietly extinct, became one of the most cited metaphors of the late 20th century. Urbanists pointed to it, religious leaders quoted it, politicians on every side of every issue found something in those mice they could use. Anyone who wanted to warn about the decay of modern life had their proof. Comfort kills. That was the lesson. Simple, clean, satisfying. Except that wasn't what Calhoun actually said. The twist: detonate the reading. This is your comment magnet. His real conclusion was sitting right there in the paper, in his own words, and almost nobody quoted it. He wrote, "If the number of individuals capable of filling meaningful roles greatly exceeds the number of roles available,
Only disruption can follow. Read that again. Not comfort, not abundance, not softness. The killer was the disappearance of meaningful roles. The food never ran out, the water never ran out, the space never actually filled up. The enclosure could have held 3,800 mice. It peaked at 2,200. What ran out was something nobody had thought to put in paradise to begin with. Think about what that means. The fighters had no one left to fight for. The builders had no unclaimed ground to build on. The mothers were defending nests that no structure supported. The young grew up with nothing they were expected to inherit, no role waiting for them, no reason the colony needed them specifically. Not because the world was cruel, because the world had already filled every seat at the table before they arrived. The mice didn't stop participating because life got too hard. They stopped because life stopped needing them to. Comfort didn't kill them. It just removed the friction that made being alive feel something. And here is where it stops being about mice. Because you live in a world that has quietly, efficiently filled a lot of the roles that used to require a human being to show up and fight for them. A lot of the struggle that used to mean something has been replaced with something easier, faster, smoother. And somewhere in the middle of all that convenience, a version of you started grooming. Not because you're weak, not because something is wrong with you, because a system designed to remove all friction eventually removes the reason to move at all. The beautiful ones weren't broken animals. They were the logical conclusion of a world that never asked anything of them. And before you close this video and tell yourself it doesn't apply to you, Calhoun spent the rest of his life trying to find the way out. He believed there was one. He believed humans could choose differently than the mice did. What he found is what we need to talk about next.
Here is the part almost nobody quotes. John Calhoun was not a doomer. He didn't build Universe 25 to tell you the world was ending. He wasn't trying to scare you. He was trying to find a way out. And he spent the rest of his career doing exactly that. After the paper, he didn't stop building universes. He kept changing the variables. He kept asking the same question from different angles. Not what destroys a society, but what saves one. He believed, with everything he had, that humans could choose differently than the mice did, because we have something the mice never had. We can create new roles out of nothing. Ideational generativity, the way out. He called it ideational generativity, a long phrase, a simple idea. He wrote, "As physical space contracts, the only way forward is to extend ourselves into conceptual space, into ideas, into networks, into the work of building roles that did not exist before." The mice ran out of territory. They had no way to make more. When the ground was full, they were finished. They had no mechanism to invent new ground. We do. Every time a human being builds something that didn't exist, a business, a community, a craft, a body of work, a relationship that requires daily effort to maintain, they're creating a role, not just for themselves, for everyone the thing touches. The teacher who builds the course nobody else has built. The person who starts the conversation their neighborhood wasn't having. The creator who makes the thing only they could make. Every single one of them is doing what the mice biologically could not. They are expanding their territory from the inside. The confrontation. Make the viewer choose. So here is what this experiment actually leaves you with. Not a warning, not a diagnosis, a question. Are you building something or are you grooming? Not in a dramatic way, in the quiet daily way the beautiful ones groomed, tending to their appearance, consuming, moving through the enclosure as if nothing required them, looking fine from the outside, going nowhere from the inside. Because the world will not tell you when you've crossed that line. It will just keep feeding you, keep the temperature stable, keep your hoppers full,
and it will never once ask whether you're still participating in your own life. The mice had no choice. When the rolls ran out, they were done. No override, no awareness, no ability to look at what was happening and decide to do something different. They couldn't name what was killing them. They couldn't even see it. You just watched the whole thing happen in 10 minutes. You know what the behavioral sink looks like. You know what the drift looks like. You know what the beautiful ones look like, because at some point, in some part of your life, you have felt the pull toward becoming one. That pull is not a weakness. It is the logical response to a world that removed all friction and forgot to replace it with meaning. But logical responses and right responses are not always the same thing. The closing, engineered for shares, not just views. Calhoun spent 5 years watching Universe 25 die. He documented every phase. He named every pattern. And at the end of it, he didn't conclude that collapse was inevitable. He concluded that collapse was the default, and that choosing differently is the only thing that separates what we are from what the mice were. The food never ran out in Universe 25. The water never ran out. The space never filled. What ran out was the will to be needed, the hunger to build something, the decision, made daily, not once, to be someone the world requires. The mice had no choice. You're still making yours.